Globalization. It's a word we as law students frequently hear, but how exactly does it relate to us? According to Professor Juliana Capaldo, globalization has spurred on the structuring process of a global community in which a coherent legal system for a universal human society is being built. As future lawyers operating in this system, whether in the fields of public or private international law, overseas or within Australia, we will need a unique set of skills beyond simply understanding the text of the law. One of these skills is cultural intelligence. Arguably, one of the best ways for students to develop cultural intelligence is to study abroad. Not only does it give students the opportunity to study in a foreign institution, but according to Jane Costello, it provides two intellectual benefits. The first is disposition to critical reflection, and the second is decreased xenophobia, fear, and ethnic distance. This case study attempts to build on the existing body of knowledge about the value of exchange programs for law students, particularly in relation to the development of cultural intelligence, which is vital to successful global practice. Let's first look at Jones and Schubert's proposition that exchange increases students' disposition to critical reflection. This idea has found support in Edward Ingram and Deborah Peterson's research, assessing the impact of study abroad on student learning at Michigan State University. Upon personal reflection of my time studying at the University of Leeds in the UK, I believe this to be true. One of the perks of studying in England was having Europe at your doorstep, and it was not unusual for us to visit other countries on the weekend. One trip in particular has always stood out for me, and that was our trip to Paris. I remember how I initially struggled to obtain directions from the locals. At first, I thought the French was simply living up to their stereotype of being rude and snobby, but upon further reflection, I started to consider the exchange from the locals' perspective. If the roles were reversed, I would have expected them to ask me for directions in English. So why then shouldn't I show the same courtesy? As soon as I attempted to speak French, the locals were immediately more forthcoming, albeit laughing at my poor French skills. If I had not been travelling, I doubt that I would have had the same opportunity for self-reflection. After all, in Perth as a local, I have the upper hand in most situations. But here I got to experience what it feels like to be the outsider. Now I find that I am much more empathetic and more inclined to consider situations from others' perspectives. This is great, but how is it important to the practice of global law? Well, for starters, it helped me to recognise that language is intrinsic to the expression of culture and plays a strong role in conveying shared values and traditions. Being able to express oneself in a way that corresponds with the cultural norms of the community is vital for lawyers if they want to respect domestic, national, and international relationships with clients, other law firms, and authorities. Now let's look at Parsons' proposition that studying abroad leads to decreased xenophobia, fear, and ethnic distance. There was one flatmate in particular who had a major impact on my time abroad, and her name was Cowan. Cowan was born in Jerusalem but raised the majority of her life in California before moving back when she was 15, where she had to reintegrate and learn Arabic. I was always fascinated by our conversations, especially hearing her opinions on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Until I met her, I had never come across someone who was personally affected, and our conversations gave me a new perspective to consider. Through Cowan, I was also fortunate enough to be invited to Shabbat dinner and develop a relationship with the Jewish community in Leeds. One of my favourite memories was washing dishes with the rabbi's wife, while a group of students tried to teach me Arabic. Even though I'm not Jewish, as long as I went there with an open mind and a desire to learn, they were willing to accept and include me. Had it not been for my exchange, I would never have engaged as closely with the Jewish community or met so many diverse and wonderful people. Deborah Peterson's research suggests the ability to be open-minded is integral to the practice of law in a global context, where lawyers will undoubtedly be exposed to other cultures and ethnicities that are not their own. Based on my experiences, I believe going on exchange allows students to develop this outlook at an earlier stage, so that by the time they're practicing, they're already more accepting and attuned to alternative values and beliefs. Even though the value of exchange is mainly assessed through students' subjective experiences, this in no way diminishes the positive impact it has on developing cultural intelligence, and I believe it is valuable for law students who will go on to practice in a global context.